I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. Before leaving Albany in June, Democratic state lawmakers pushed through more than a dozen bills designed to protect the rights of workers in the Empire State, including restrictions on severance agreements, doubling down on sexual harassment prevention training, and ensuring access to personnel files. For the business management and ownership perspective on some of these mandates, we're joined in the studio by Frank Kerbein, Director of the Center for Human Resources at the Business Council of New York State. Welcome back to the show, Frank.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Well, I want to start by discussing legislation that is supposed to ensure workers have access to their personnel records, keeps them abreast of anything negative that goes into their file, and provides an avenue for an employee to submit written pushback if they disagree with something in their record. That sounds kind of like a simple step in transparency and fairness, but I guess two questions. What do you think about the general premise of this, and what about the specific logistics laid out in this proposal?
I think employers in general don't have any opposition to allowing employees to access their personnel files. I think almost all employers have a process in place to do that. What this does, though, is it puts financial penalties on businesses in New York who fail to comply with the specific requirements of this bill. 455,000 businesses in New York, 451,000 have less than 20 employees. You can imagine they don't have a human resource professional on staff to manage this system. We get a lot of unintentional noncompliance, right? They don't know of the statute. They don't know there's fines and penalties associated with this. And for larger employers, it's an administrative burden. If you have 1,000 employees who want their access 2 times a year, that's a lot. And some of the terms are vague. What's a negative insertion into the personnel file? If I put your attendance record into the personnel file, and it happens to be a not-so-great attendance record, is that negative?
Well, I mean, that was something that came up during the Assembly debate. I think on the face, that would seem like it is negative in the sense that it would potentially impact your future employment, your opportunities for promotion. So, I mean, is that really that complicated of a thing?
You know, these terms, negative and opportunity to rebut and have a discussion if they disagree, all these things are so subjective that it puts these smaller organizations without legal counsel, without an HR professional, at risk of noncompliance.
Could you just err on the side of caution then and just do additional disclosure? If you're unsure, just let somebody know?
I think employers, that's what you do, right? Is that a greater administrative burden or a lesser administrative burden than employers have now in New York State? And this isn't in a vacuum. This is on top of the already cumbersome business environment that exists out there now. So when I talk to a lot of employer groups, the reaction is almost unanimous. It's like, one more thing, right? One more thing that we have to do and we fail to do, there'll be a cost associated with doing it.
So then, in terms of an enforcement mechanism, would you want to see something baked into this that ensures that you're not automatically going to some sort of civil penalties, that there is some sort of understanding that, hey, you get a notice once if you've...
Opportunity to correct your violation. Yeah, and that's what it always comes down to, right, is there's always the enforcement. The last couple of paragraphs of every bill explains the cost of this, and this cost is not inconsequential. And again, so many of New York employers, small and business is the backbone of New York State. We keep hearing, here's another burden put upon them to comply with. Failing to do so, dollars and cents cost to them.
Well, I want to pivot to another bill, and this has to do with ensuring employees are properly notified of their employer's sexual harassment prevention policy, as well as sexual harassment prevention training programs. What does that look like compared to the status quo? Because I thought a few years ago we all had to get some sort of training and sign off that we had been trained.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's always a best practice to document your efforts to comply with the law, which employers have done. We have to provide an annual training program. We have to provide our policy, our training materials to current and new employees on or before the date of hire. To do that and to show that we've done that, employers will traditionally get an acknowledgement of receipt, right? I acknowledge that I received the training, that I understand the training, that I understand I can ask questions. If I have questions, who do I go to if I have questions? That's already been done. What this bill does is it focuses on the employee's primary language. I'd argue that what they already signed is acknowledgement that they understand and understand they have to ask questions.
I sure hope so.
Right? They're signing it. But this would require all employers in the state to redo their acknowledgement form to include a provision where the employee can certify that I have been offered this form in my primary language. And it says also in English and their primary language. So you're giving these individuals who maybe English isn't their primary language 2 forms. They're going to get in English and their primary language. So again, just this cumulative administrative burden that falls on employers of all sizes that's adds to the perception that New York isn't the most business-friendly state in the country.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Frank Kerbein, Director of the Center for Human Resources at the Business Council of New York State. So another measure that was approved this year deals with reporting by businesses on the impact of artificial intelligence on the hiring that they do and sort of the nature of artificial intelligence use for the previous year. On the face of it, this seems like it's designed to protect jobs, jobs that might be at risk of being replaced by the use of artificial intelligence. But what's your sense of this bill? And, do you have any idea why? Is there a reason why you think this is being pushed?
Yeah, I think the legislature has AI on the brain in some cases and felt they had to do something, and we're unsure about how AI will impact jobs and hiring and hours worked. And this statute, the bill you're referring to, has an annual reporting requirement on employers of 50 or more. So that's, again, going to capture some small and mid-sized companies.
And they lowered that threshold during the course of the amendment process.
Right, down to that 50 or more threshold. That is, and I think what they did is maybe they rushed through this a little too much without thinking it through. And so it asks employers to come up with some vague metrics that are maybe undefinable, right? To what degree, in full or in part, does artificial intelligence result in the reduction of employment and the impact on hiring or reduction of hours? To what degree, in full or in part, did it add jobs? What is the nature of your use of artificial intelligence? How do you have human oversight of your use of AI in the workplace? I think that the metrics are vague. I think it gives the DOL sort of a scope that could expand. It says they're allowed to come up with any other measurements that they think will impact this, so there's no limits on what the DOL could ask for on an annual basis. Again, I think we're okay with this as businesses trying to determine the impact of AI on jobs. We all are curious how this is going to impact us. But put this annual reporting requirement on businesses as written in this bill, it's just not a good place to start. Let's rethink this. Let's try again in next session and try to come up with a program that is an effective measure of this. And put aside things like how does this incent or disincent use of AI or companies who are focused on AI moving into New York State. Again, it makes New York an outlier, I think, in terms of AI and doesn't put us in a position of being someone who's friendly to this innovation and this technology.
Well, what do you think of the idea that from a policy perspective that policymakers in New York want to be armed with the most current and most expansive information about how AI is being used so that they can craft and cater policies to either support the growth of AI when it's deemed beneficial to public policy or potentially put protections or limitations on AI? I mean, do you think
question.
So you think it makes sense to have
it'd be better if they had the information. This bill ain't it. This isn't going to get them the information they need or want. It's going to confuse and discombobulate employers and what they're supposed to report. For instance, we write memos in support and opposition of bills all the time. I said, I wonder how ChatGPT would write a memo in opposition to this bill. And so I asked it to, and it did a fantastic job, by the way, of writing a memo in opposition to this bill. Is that reportable for an employer in terms of our use of AI?
Well, my next question was going to be, could you just, as an employer, have AI write your annual report in response to the state?
Now you're onto something. If the DOL were to put it in a format like that we could report on an annual basis, just ask AI to prompt it, then maybe we got something. But, it's just vague metrics, stifles innovation, sets employers of 50 or more up for failure, gives the DOL too much authority to expand and change maybe what they're looking for in this. Just too much unknown at this part. So we're all in favor of getting the accurate data. We want them to make accurate, informed decisions at the legislature on this, but this isn't the way to do it.
Well, turning to another recurring issue in the legislature and one that businesses really care about, there's a bill dealing with the worker compensation system in New York. Can you explain the red flags that have been raised on this one for business interests?
Yeah, it would prohibit insurance carriers or employers who are making indemnity payments to injured workers.
Indemnity payments meaning?
Replacing income lost as a result of an injury based on their attachment to the labor market. The whole goal of the workers' compensation system is to have our injured workers get treatment, get better, be able to return to work. We want them to be full members of society and be able to return to work. By removing this requirement that there's an attachment to the labor market. Let's say I have a debilitating injury, I have a back injury, I can't work in my current job, but I can work in other jobs. I'd be no incentive to do so. I'd be able to just go on. It turns workers' compensation into a Social Security type benefit, indemnity benefit that just goes on forever and ever. It would had tremendous cost to the workers' compensation system, a system 100% paid for by employers. It would remove incentive for injured workers to get back to work. We have employers struggling to find jobs now. What if we were to remove everyone from workers' compensation from the labor market? So I mean,
most people like working, though, and I have to imagine this wouldn't be the most utilized benefit of all time, or do you think it would be?
I think this would have I think our advice to the governor would be to have the public actuary at the New York Workers' Comp Insurance Rating Board to do an analysis of the proposed cost of this. And I think you would see billions in additional cost to the workers' comp system from this. And, Social Security disability benefits are socialized amongst all of us, right? I mean, we all are in that system. We all contribute to that system. If this were to turn into that Social Security disability type program, this falls 100% on employers. Right. If that's what they're intending with this program, then we need to find a way to fund this that's not 100% based on employers' contributions.
And thinking about the session more broadly, then, does this past legislative session and budget feel any different than previous sessions? Does it feel similar in terms of the additional layers of mandates on businesses? Because we have generally gotten positive reviews from groups like the Partnership for New York City, which represents business interests in the Big Apple, those large corporations. But I guess sort of what's your perspective when you sort of take it all in as vibes?
Yeah, from my areas, I do labor, human resource, workers' comp, those issues. Wasn't that bad, right? I mean, from an employer perspective. I think the budget put time constraints on the rest of the legislative activities, and anytime they run out of, measuring productivity by the number of bills you pass isn't my favorite way of measuring a productive legislative session.
Sure.
But, I think that we were happy with how some things turned out, and I think it was a better than average system. But I think it had more to do with the time pressures they were under, the late budget, the primaries looming over many of their members. We can't count on that every year, right? We need to help them understand how these impact New York business and its perception.
Well, we've been speaking with Frank Kerbein. He's the director of the Center for Human Resources at the Business Council of New York State. Thanks so much for making the time, Frank.
I'm glad to do it anytime. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.